My father called the university and said that I suffered from a severe mental disorder. With just that single statement, the entire medical scholarship I had spent 4 years earning was revoked within 24 hours. If you have ever had your own family destroy your dreams, please leave a comment below. I want to know if I am the only one. My name is Emily Carter. I am 25 years old. I was born and raised in the state of California, in a family outsiders always called perfect. My father, Richard Carter, is the owner of a well-known private clinic in the city. He appears in local newspapers as a successful businessman and a model father. My mother is a woman who always dresses elegantly, attends charity events, and speaks to everyone in a gentle voice. My older brother Daniel is the pride of the entire family, the one sent to a private university at 18. I am different. I am the second daughter, the child everyone thought was born only to stay inside the house. From a young age, I learned how to stay silent at family dinners. When Daniel talked about his athletic achievements or business projects at school, my father would set his wine glass down and listen attentively. When I said I was top of my biology class, he only nodded indifferently. "Daughters do not need to be too outstanding," he once said. "You will get married someday. Anyway." My mother often looked at me with guilt in her eyes, but she never stood on my side. In that house, my father's decisions were always the law. The only person who treated me like a real human being was my grandfather, Henry Carter. He had been a military doctor during the Gulf War. After retirement, he lived quietly on the second floor of the house, with an old suitcase and hundreds of medical textbooks with worn spines. Every afternoon after school, I would sneak into his room to do my homework. He taught me how to read medical records, how to take a pulse, and most importantly, how to see patients as human beings, not numbers. "Medicine is not power," he once told me. When I asked why my father did not want me to study medicine, "It is responsibility, and you have the heart for it." When I was with him, I felt allowed to dream. But in that house, dreaming was dangerous. My father had mapped out my life since I was 16. He wanted me to study a light major, then return to work as an accountant for the family clinic. After that, I would marry the son of a business partner. My life was arranged like a contract. The first time I resisted was in my final year of high school. "I want to study medicine," I said at dinner, my hands shaking, but I did not back down. "I want to become a doctor." The room fell into silence. My father looked at me as if I had betrayed the family. "Do you think you are better than your brother?" he asked. "Daniel is the one who will inherit this clinic." That night, my bedroom door was locked from the outside. No one spoke to me for an entire week. Meals were left outside my door, like for a stranger. Only my grandfather quietly handed me an old anatomy book. "Keep it," he said. "If one day you have to leave this place, you will need knowledge to stand on your own." I did not fully understand the meaning of those words at the time. When I was 22, my grandfather died of a stroke. The funeral was quick and cold. My father received guests and spoke about my grandfather's contributions to the medical community, but only I knew that in his final years, he lived like an invisible man in his own home. After the funeral, while cleaning his room, I found an old yellow envelope in a drawer. On it was written in trembling handwriting for Emily. "When you truly need it." I did not open it. At that time, I thought I still had a family. 4 years later, I won a full medical scholarship at a prestigious university in New York. The day I received the acceptance email, I cried in the bathroom so no one would hear me. I believed I could finally leave the glass cage called family. And then with a single phone call, my father destroyed everything. That morning I went home to ask him why. He said only one sentence in a calm voice, as if talking about the weather. "I did it for your future." I looked at the man in front of me, and for the first time understood that to him my future was something that could be sacrificed to maintain control. At that moment, I remembered my grandfather's old envelope. I did not yet know what was inside, but I knew one thing: if he had prepared a way out for me, then it was time to open it. After the scholarship was revoked, the Carter family house was no longer a refuge. It became a sealed box where every movement I made was monitored by questions that sounded like concern, but were actually control. My father began calling me into his office every evening. He sat behind a large wooden desk with awards and photos with local politicians behind him. I stood in front of him like an employee being summoned. "You need time to rethink your future," he said. "New York is not suitable for you. You are weak, you are easily pressured. Here I can protect you. I realized he was not talking about safety, he was talking about control. From that day, my phone had to be left on the living room table every night. My laptop was required to be unlocked. My father said it was because he worried about me after the psychological incident he had fabricated. My mother did not object. She only quietly brought tea into his office, then turned to me and said softly, "Do not complicate things further. Your father is under a lot of pressure." Pressure? I was the one who had just lost my entire future. Yet in this family story, my father was the victim. Daniel was different. He came home after hearing about my scholarship loss, but not to comfort me. He looked at me like a failed project. "You should listen to Dad," he said in the kitchen. "Dad knows what is best for the family. Stop embarrassing everyone." I do not know what hurt more, my father, destroying my future, or my brother believing it was the right thing. In the days that followed, my father began arranging my life the way he arranged patient appointments. In the mornings, I had to help with accounting at the clinic. In the afternoons, he sent me to skills classes suitable for women, household management, social communication, even cooking for reception dinners. There was no time left for medical books, no quiet evenings to study, only schedules I had never chosen. Whenever I resisted, my father used the same sentence: "I do this for you." I began to doubt myself. There were nights I lay in bed and wondered if I was truly weak, if I was not strong enough to become a doctor, if he was right when he said I could not handle pressure. That is the most dangerous form of control, making you believe you cannot live without the person imprisoning you. One evening, I overheard a conversation between my father and mother in the living room. "The girl has to stay here," my father said. "If she leaves, everything will fall apart. Our partners are counting on that marriage." My mother was silent for a long time, then asked, "But she is still young. She has dreams." My father gave a cold laugh. "Dreams do not feed a family." I stood behind the door, feeling as if I had been slapped in the face. That was when I understood the scholarship was not the only thing that had been revoked. My future had been traded like a commodity. I began to be cut off from the outside world. Friends from my old university messaged asking why I no longer replied. I did not know what to say. "How do you explain that your own father called you mentally unstable before a scholarship committee?" My father also called several people I knew, telling them I needed rest because of psychological issues. Every relationship I had was twisted into a story where I was a weak person who needed supervision. My reputation slowly died in silence. The only place I could still breathe was my grandfather's room. I often sneaked up there at night, sitting on the old chair where he used to read. I opened the medical books he left behind and read under a small desk lamp. It was the only way I remembered who I used to be. Once my father caught me there. "Why are you still clinging to these useless things?" he asked. "I already told you that you do not need them anymore." He carried the books downstairs and locked my grandfather's room. I stood in the hallway for the first time, feeling I had no place left to hide. That night I cried for a long time. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized this family would never give me freedom unless I took it myself. In despair, I suddenly remembered the yellow envelope my grandfather had left behind. It was still in my desk drawer, covered in dust for 4 years. I took it out and placed it on the bed. The words, "when you truly need it," felt like they were staring straight at me. Maybe this was that moment. I did not open the envelope right away. I just held it in my hands for a long time, like holding a key I was not yet brave enough to use. But for the first time since the scholarship was revoked, I felt I was not completely alone. Somewhere in the past, my grandfather had already foreseen this day, and perhaps he had left me a path my father could not control. That night I did not sleep. The yellow envelope lay on the desk like a living thing that I could not take my eyes off. I sat on the bed with my back against the wall, listening to the ticking clock and my parents' voices speaking quietly downstairs. Every time my father laughed, my heart tightened. I was afraid to open it, not because of what might be inside, but because I was afraid of hope. I had lived too long with the feeling that every dream required my family permission. I no longer had the strength to be disappointed one more time. But as dawn approached, I tore open the edge of the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small USB drive. My grandfather's handwriting trembled but was still clear. "Emily, if you are reading these lines, it means you have reached the moment when this house can no longer protect you. I am sorry I could not tell you sooner, but some truths are only safe when kept hidden. Your father is a smart man, but he does not see you as an independent person. He sees you as part of a plan. I tried to change that, but I failed. So I prepared another path for you. I had to stop several times because my hands were shaking. Inside the envelope, there were also copies of legal documents and a slip of paper with the password for the USB. I plugged the USB into my computer. The screen showed a folder named Emily Future. Inside were files organized by year. The year I was 17, the year I was 19, the year I was 21. Each file was a voice recording of my grandfather. I opened the first file. His voice came through slowly. Today you told me you want to become a doctor. I am proud of you. But your father came to see me and said you should not dream too high. My tears fell onto the keyboard. The next file, Richard asked me to transfer the clinic shares to Daniel. I refused. I do not believe in the way Richard uses power. I believe in you, Emily. If one day you need to leave, these documents will help you stand on your own. I opened the attached documents. A trust fund in my name, an education account opened 7 years ago, and a supplementary will my father had never mentioned, clearly stating that my grandfather's lawful share of the clinic would belong to me when I turned 25. That day, I had just turned 25. I sat motionless in front of the screen, not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, someone had prepared a real way out for me. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "You do not need to confront your father directly. The truth will find its own way to the light. You only need to keep these documents safe and wait for the right moment." I remembered the day he handed me the anatomy book. You need knowledge to stand on your own. It turned out he left me not only knowledge but also the right to choose. I shut down the computer when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I hid the envelope and the USB at the bottom of my grandfather's old suitcase, the one my father had never paid attention to. The next morning I looked at my father with different eyes. No longer only fear but clarity. He continued talking about plans for me to work at the clinic, attend family gatherings, prepare for an arranged marriage. I nodded. But in my head, my grandfather's words echoed. Wait for the right moment. I began pretending to be obedient. I went to work on time. I stopped mentioning New York. My father believed I had been subdued, but every night I reread the letter and legal documents like studying a new subject. For the first time since the scholarship was revoked, I had a plan. Not my father's plan, but mine. And I knew the day I opened the envelope was not the end. It was only the beginning of a confrontation my family was not prepared to face. Before my grandfather's envelope opened another path for me, the New York dream had been the only thing that kept me alive in that house. I did not tell anyone about applying for a medical scholarship. I studied in silence like someone digging a tunnel to escape the high walls of family. During the day, I worked at the clinic as my father required. At night, I sat in my room with the door closed, studying anatomy and biology until my eyes burned. There were nights I fell asleep at the desk with a pen still in my hand, my head filled with images of hospitals I had seen in books. My grandfather was the only one who knew what I was preparing for. Before he died, he often asked, "Do you still remember why you want to be a doctor?" I answered that I wanted to save people. He shook his head. Not just to save people. You want to decide your own life. Medicine is only the path that leads you out of here. I remembered that sentence for many years. Applying for the scholarship was not easy. I had to write my own essays, request recommendation letters from professors at my old university, and work night shifts to pay the application fees. Every response letter made me tremble with fear that my father would find out. When the acceptance email from New York University arrived, I was at the clinic standing next to the reception desk. I opened it in the restroom. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for a full scholarship in the medical program." I read that sentence over and over 3 times before believing it. I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out loud. For the first time in my life, I felt a door opening in front of me. I began planning my departure in my head. I searched for cheap housing in New York. I read about the program. I imagined myself walking into a lecture hall with an old backpack and a new life. But I did not tell my father, partly out of fear, and partly because I wanted to have all the documents in hand before facing him. My biggest mistake was believing that academic achievement could change him. When I told my father that I had been accepted for the scholarship, he was silent for a long time. Then he asked, "Who gave you permission to apply?" I answered that it was my dream. He stood up, walked to the window, and said, "You do not know how cruel the world outside is. Here I can protect you." 3 days later, my scholarship was revoked. I did not know what had happened until the school called me, and then I understood that my dream had been crushed by my own father before it had a chance to bloom. In the first days after the scholarship was revoked, I lived in a haze. I thought it might be a mistake. I thought the school might reconsider. But then the official rejection emails arrived one by one, cold and final. The New York dream dissolved as if it had never existed. I felt like I had done everything right, studied hard, lived quietly, caused no trouble, and yet I was still not allowed to leave. The most painful thing was not losing the scholarship but realizing that my success was a threat to my father's control. I began to understand what my grandfather once said: medicine is only the path, freedom is the destination. Now that I had the secret envelope and legal documents in my hands, the New York dream was no longer a vague thought. It became a real goal. I began preparing again, not by applying immediately, but by building a foundation so that one day I could leave without being pulled back. I searched my old emails from the school, saved all previous scholarship documents, recorded everything that had happened like an evidence diary. I knew that at the right time the truth would have to be told, not only so I could return to New York, but so the world would know that my dream had been destroyed by the very person who was supposed to protect me. That night I stood by my bedroom window looking at the city lights and whispered a promise to myself that one day I would leave this place not as an obedient daughter but as a free person, and I knew that dream was not dead, it was only waiting for the right moment to live again. I do not know exactly when I began to suspect my father. It was just one afternoon when I walked into his office to look for a patient file and saw that his computer was still open. On the screen was an email, the recipient admissions office of New York University. My heart pounded so hard my ears rang. I froze in front of the desk as if one more step would make the whole house collapse. I did not intend to snoop, but the subject line was too clear. We're concerned regarding applicant Emily Carter. My name lay there cold and exposed. My hand shook as I grabbed the mouse and clicked it open. The email was not long, but every line cut like a knife. My father wrote that I had a history of mental instability, that I had shown extreme behavior, that I was not stable enough to pursue a high-pressure medical program. He ended with one sentence: as the legal guardian, I request that the school reconsider its decision to award the scholarship. I did not cry or scream, I just stood there, unable to breathe. So the scholarship was not revoked because of an administrative error, not because of missing documents, but because my own father had killed it. I quietly left the office and closed the door as if I had never entered. At dinner that night, my father spoke as usual. He asked how my day at the clinic was. He told me I should rest early, his voice gentle like a caring father. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I no longer saw my father. I only saw someone holding the key to a cage. 2 days later, my mother called me into the living room. Daniel was there too. My father sat across from me with his hands clasped together. The family needs to have a serious talk, he said. I knew this was not a conversation. It was a sentence. He said I was not ready for the outside world, that New York was too dangerous, that I needed to stay home a few more years to stabilize. Then he presented a new plan. I would marry the son of one of his business partners, a young doctor, a stable person. That would be good for you, he said. You will have your own family, someone to take care of you. No need to worry about unrealistic dreams. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I did not laugh, I would scream. So my dream of becoming a doctor was being traded for an arranged marriage. I looked at my mother. She lowered her head. Your father only wants to protect you, she said softly. Daniel nodded. You are always too emotional. You should listen to Dad. I realized I was sitting among 3 strangers. No one asked what I wanted. No one cared how many years I had tried. That night I went back to my room and locked the door. I opened my grandfather's USB again, watched every video he recorded, read every page he left behind. For the first time, I was no longer afraid. I began recording my father conversations, photographing the emails he sent to the school, saving every piece of evidence. I did not know what I would do with them, but I knew one thing. If I stayed silent, I would die in this house, not physically, but as a human being. One evening, my father walked into my room without knocking. He saw the suitcase I had hidden under the bed. Where are you going? He asked. I am just organizing my things, I replied. He sneered. "You are not going anywhere. You need to stay here." His voice was no longer gentle. It was the voice of command. "You are my daughter. I know what is best for you." I looked straight at him. For the first time. "No," I said. "You know what is best for you?" He froze. In that moment I saw the anger clearly on his face. "You are becoming ungrateful," he said. "Without me, you would have nothing." That sentence hit me like a curse. I remembered my grandfather's words. "Anyone who makes you believe you cannot live without them is imprisoning you." That night I sat down to write a letter, not to my father but to myself. That I was not crazy, that I was not weak, that my dream was legitimate, and that if I had to leave, I would leave with the truth. I began to plan. Not an escape plan, but a plan to confront. A confrontation my family was not prepared for, and I knew that day was very close. After the night I wrote that letter to myself, I no longer cried. I began playing the role of a good daughter. In the mornings I woke earlier than usual to help my mother prepare breakfast. I asked my father about his work at the clinic. I did not mention New York. I did not mention the scholarship. I did not mention the arranged marriage. My family breathed a sigh of relief. They thought I had accepted my fate. My father began speaking more gently. He believed my silence was surrender. Daniel returned to his role as the advising older brother. My mother looked at me with a mix of pity and reassurance. No one knew that every night when my bedroom door closed, I lived another life. I opened my grandfather's USB. I read every file he left behind. There were recordings of conversations between him and my father about money, documents about a trust fund in my name, even legal contracts prepared before he died. My grandfather had prepared an escape route for me without my knowing it. His lawyer, Mr. Harris, lived in a town more than 2 hours' drive away. I called him using an old phone bought from a second-hand shop not connected to the family network. Mr. Harris' voice was low and calm. "Your grandfather told me that if one day you called, it would mean you were ready." We arranged to meet on a rainy afternoon. I told my mother I was going out to buy study books. I sat on the bus, clutching the bag with the USB and my grandfather envelope. For the first time in many years, I left the house without asking my father permission. The law office was small and old. Mr. Harris showed me all the documents, the trust fund in my name that my father could not access, my grandfather, small house in the suburbs that had been left to me, and most importantly, all those assets could only be used when I reached 18 and signed for them myself. "You do not need anyone's permission," he said. I sat there silently. I had lived in my father's house feeling like I had nothing, but it turned out I had a path all along. Mr. Harris also reviewed the evidence I brought. The emails my father sent to the school, the recordings of family conversations, the arranged marriage plans. He looked at me for a long time and said, "If you want, we can make the truth come out legally." I did not answer right away. I was not ready to break everything yet. Not yet. I needed the right time. I returned home as if I had never left. That evening my father asked if I had bought the books. I nodded. He smiled. Fake peace settled over the house. Meanwhile, I began preparing. I backed up all the evidence in 3 different places. I learned how to manage my own bank account. I secretly reapplied to a pre-medical program at another school, using an email address not connected to the family. I also learned how to say yes without meaning agreement. When my father talked about the wedding, I stayed silent. When my mother asked if I was worried, I said I needed time. Daniel believed I had returned to being his obedient little sister. Only I knew that every passing day brought me one step closer to the confrontation. One evening at dinner, my father announced that next month there would be a meeting with the other family, and that I should prepare myself. I put my spoon down. My heart raced, but I nodded. Yes. It was the first time I had seen him satisfied in months. That night I texted Mr. Harris. "It is time," we planned. Not to run away, but to stand in this house and tell the truth. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would let the evidence speak for me. I thought of my grandfather, of the New York dream, of the girl who once sat in a restroom reading a scholarship email and trembling with happiness. I was no longer that girl. I had become someone who knew she had the right to choose. The day of confrontation was coming, and this time I would not let anyone else write my life for me. I looked into the mirror, and for the first time I saw someone who was no longer afraid. I saw someone ready to step out of the cage. The house was brighter than usual. My father said it was just a friendly meeting between two families, but the way my mother laid out the white tablecloth, the way Daniel wore a perfectly tailored suit, and the way my father stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, showed that this was not a simple dinner. This was the debut of my new life. The other family arrived at 6 in the evening. My future father-in-law shook my father's hand tightly. The two of them smiled like business partners who had just signed a major deal. The mother looked me up and down, with the evaluating gaze of someone choosing an item in a luxury store. The son, the man they called my future fiancé, was tall and neatly dressed and spoke very little. He smiled politely, but his eyes were empty. I stood in the familiar living room but felt as if I were in a completely different place. My father introduced me like an achievement. My daughter is very well behaved. She always listens to the family. We raised her that way from childhood. I smiled. No one knew that in my jacket pocket was a USB drive. The meal unfolded in an atmosphere so fake it was suffocating. They talked about the future, about the house I would live in, about the children I would have. No one asked whether I wanted any of it. The other mother said, "A girl like Emily should not live alone in a big city. It is too dangerous." My father nodded immediately. "That is right. She is not strong enough for high-pressure environments." I set my glass down on the table. My heart was pounding. I looked around the room. My father, my mother, Daniel, and 6 other people discussing my life as if I did not exist. This was the moment. I stood up. "May I say something?" The room fell silent. My father frowned slightly. "Sit down." "No," I said, my voice strangely calm. "I want to speak now." I took the USB out of my pocket. Tonight is not just a family meeting. Tonight is when I want to tell the truth. My mother's face went pale. Daniel sighed. My father jumped to his feet. "Emily, what are you doing?" I looked straight at him. "I want everyone to know why I did not go to New York, why my full scholarship was revoked, and why I am sitting here today." The room stirred. The other mother looked at my father. "What scholarship?" I opened the laptop I had prepared and plugged in the USB. The email appeared on the screen. "This is the email my father sent to the university," I said. In it, he said, I was mentally unstable and not capable of studying medicine. My father shouted, "Turn it off right now." But it was too late. Everyone had read it. The air froze. I continued, "My father says he did it to protect me. But in truth, he was afraid I would leave. He was afraid of losing control." I played the recording. My father's voice filled the living room. "You do not need to study anymore. You need to stay home. Father knows what is best for you." My mother covered her mouth. Daniel looked at the floor. The other father frowned. He said he had never been told any of this. My father's face turned red. "She is making it up. She is mentally unstable. She was influenced by her grandfather." I turned to everyone. "These are the trust documents my grandfather left for me, and this is proof that my father has no right to decide my life." I did not shout or cry. I spoke each sentence slowly, like reading an indictment. For many years, my phone, my email, my money were controlled. I was not allowed to go out without permission, and today I was presented like a gift in an arranged marriage. The other son stood up. "I did not know about this," he said quietly. I thought she agreed. I looked at him. "I was never asked." The room fell into silence. Then the other mother stood up and picked up her purse. "I do not think this is something we want to be involved in," the other father added. "Our family does not accept a marriage built on deception." They left. The door closed softly. But inside the house, it sounded like an explosion. My father turned to me. His face flushed. "You have destroyed everything." "I only told the truth," I replied. He raised his hand. My mother screamed, "Stop." Daniel stepped in front of me. "Dad, that is enough." My father stepped back as if he could not believe what he was seeing. "You betrayed the family," he said. "No," I replied. "I am just refusing to be sold." I took my grandfather's envelope from my bag. He prepared a path for me. "And tonight I am leaving this house," my mother cried. Daniel looked at me like a stranger. "Where will you go?" "To a place where I am allowed to be myself." My father collapsed into a chair. He was no longer shouting, He only whispered, "You cannot live without family." I looked at him one last time. Family is not a prison. I pulled my suitcase out of my room. The house was silent. No one stopped me. No one tried to hold me back. Only the sound of my footsteps echoed on the stairs. When I opened the door, the night wind rushed in. For the first time, I stepped outside without asking anyone permission. I did not know what the future would be like, but I knew the past had closed. Behind me, the house was still standing, but the cage was open, and I had stepped out. I did not return home that night. When the door closed behind me, I stood on the doorstep for a long time, as if waiting for someone to call me back, but there were no footsteps, no voice of my father calling my name, no sound of my mother crying behind the door, only the night wind and the empty road ahead. I drove to my grandfather's small house in the suburbs. The house, he once told me that if one day I had nowhere to go, this place would always be open to me. When I turned on the light, the room appeared with a thin layer of dust covering the furniture. On the table was still his old watch. On the bookshelf were still the yellowed medical books. I set my suitcase down on the floor and slid down to sit with my back against the wall. For the first time in my life, I was completely alone. No schedule set by my father, no supervising gaze from my mother, no Daniel reminding me how to behave, only me and the silence. But that silence was not as comforting as I had imagined. It carried fear. Fear that I would not be strong enough to live on my own. Fear that I had gone too far to ever return. Fear that my family would see me as a traitor forever. I fell asleep on the floor with the desk lamp still on. The next morning I called Mr. Harris. He answered very quickly, as if he had been waiting for that call for a long time. "Are you all right?" he asked. "For now I am still alive," I replied. We began the first legal steps. My grandfather trust fund was transferred into an account in my name. This house officially became my property. I was no longer dependent on my father money. Mr. Harris also helped me prepare a file to send to the university, including all the evidence, the email my father sent, the recordings, and my written explanation. "You do not need to sue him," he said. "You only need to reclaim the truth." The days that followed passed slowly. I learned how to cook for myself, how to pay bills, how to organize my own schedule. Small things that I had never been allowed to do before. In the evenings, I sat down to study biology and anatomy again. I wrote reapplication emails to medical schools using my personal email, no longer going through anyone in my family. 1 week later, the university sent a response. They apologized. They acknowledged that the decision to revoke my scholarship had been based on inaccurate information from my legal guardian. They said my application would be reconsidered in the next admissions cycle. I read that email for a long time, then I cried. Not because of victory, but because finally, someone believed me. Meanwhile, my family slowly fell apart in a quiet and painful way. My mother came to see me 3 days later. She stood in front of my grandfather's house for a long time before she dared to knock. When I opened the door, she looked at me like someone both unfamiliar and familiar. "Are you eating properly?" she asked. I nodded. She placed a bag of food on the table and looked around the empty house. "Your father, he does not talk to anyone anymore." I did not answer. She sat down, clasping her hands together. "I have been silent for too long," she said. "Maybe I thought keeping the family peaceful was more important than protecting you. That sentence came more than 10 years too late. But it still made my chest ache." "Why did you not stop him?" I asked. She lowered her head. "Because I was afraid of losing the family." I understood, but I also understood that fear had cost me my youth. Daniel called me on a rainy evening. "Do you hate me?" he asked. I stayed silent for a long time. "I do not hate you," I said. "But I cannot go back to being the person you want me to be." He sighed. "Father is not the same person anymore. He cannot endure losing control." I knew that. When power disappears, people reveal the emptiness inside themselves. My father did not come to see me. He did not call either. His silence stretched on like a wordless sentence, but this time I was no longer afraid of it. I began to truly live. In the mornings, I tended my grandfather's garden. In the afternoons, I studied. In the evenings, I wrote in my journal. I wrote about the years of being controlled. I wrote about the dream that was crushed. I wrote about the night I walked out of the old house, Freedom does not look like it does in movies. It is not a burst of happiness. It is the feeling of being able to choose. Choose what time to wake up. Choose what to study. Choose where to go. Choose who to become. 3 months later, I received the official letter from the school. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the medical program. I held the letter with trembling hands. The New York dream returned, but this time it was not an escape. It was a choice. I went to the cemetery to visit my grandfather. I did it, I whispered. Not because I ran away, but because I stood up. The wind moved gently through the trees. I imagined him smiling. The day I left town, my mother walked me to the bus station. She held me for a long time. "Live your life," she said. "Do not live mine." Daniel stood at a distance. He did not come closer. My father did not come. I did not turn back to look at the old house anymore. I boarded the bus with a small suitcase and an open future. In New York, I rented a small room near the school. I worked part-time at a hospital. I studied late into the night. No one knew whose daughter I was. I was just Emily, a medical student, a free person. Sometimes I received messages from my mother, occasionally from Daniel. My father remained silent. That silence no longer hurt me. It was simply an empty space I no longer needed to fill. I understood that not every family can be saved, but every person can save themselves. If you are reading this story and living in a home that makes you feel small, if you have ever been told your dream is selfish, if you have ever believed you cannot live without someone else's control, then remember, freedom is not running away. Freedom is daring to tell the truth, and daring to walk forward. I do not know what the future will be like, but I know one thing. For the first time in my life, this life is mine. If this story touched any part of your heart, please press like to support me. And if you are also on a journey to find freedom for yourself, please follow or subscribe to the channel to hear more real stories like this. You are not alone. We are learning together how to live our own lives.